He walked onto the island knowing that only one man would leave alive. His opponent was considered the greatest swordsman in all of Japan, a master who had never been defeated, whose blade moved so fast that witnesses claimed it could cut a swallow out of the sky mid-flight. The entire nation believed this would be the day Miyamoto Musashi finally met his end. But Musashi was not afraid. He had carved his own wooden sword from a boat or on the journey to the island, and he arrived late on purpose, letting his enemies stew in anger and frustration under the burning sun. When the duel began, it lasted only moments. One strike. One perfect strike. And the undefeatable Sasaki Kajiro lay dead on the sand while Musashi stood over him without a single wound. This was not luck. This was not talent. This was the result of a mindset so powerful that it turned an ordinary man into an immortal legend. Miyamoto Musashi fought in over 60 duels to the death, and he never lost a single one. He killed his first opponent when he was only 13 years old. By the time he was 30, he had become so feared that warriors would flee entire provinces just to avoid the possibility of facing him. But here is what most people miss when they study his life. Musashi was not born with supernatural abilities. He was not gifted with exceptional strength or speed. He was smaller than most of his opponents, and he often fought with wooden swords against men wielding razor-sharp steel. What made him invincible was not his body. It was his mind. He had developed a way of thinking that eliminated fear, removed hesitation, and allowed him to see clearly when every other man was blinded by panic. This mindset can be learned. And once you understand it, you will never approach challenges the same way again. The first principle that defined Musashi's fearless mindset was his relationship with death. Most people spend their entire lives running from the thought of dying. They push it to the back of their minds and pretend it does not exist. Musashi did the exact opposite. He meditated on death every single day. He visualized his own end in graphic detail, imagining every possible way he could be killed. He wrote in his famous text, the Book of Five Rings, that the way of the warrior is the resolute acceptance of death. This might sound morbid, but it was actually the source of his freedom. When you have already accepted that you will die, fear loses its grip on you. What is there to be afraid of when you have made peace with the worst possible outcome? Musashi understood that fear is simply resistance to what might happen. Remove the resistance and you remove the fear. Think about how this applies to your own life. You are not fighting sword duels, but you are facing battles every single day. The job interview that terrifies you. The conversation you keep avoiding. The dream you refuse to chase because failure seems too painful to bear. All of these fears exist because you are resisting an outcome you have not accepted. You are terrified of rejection because you have not accepted that rejection is possible and survivable. You are afraid of failure because you have not made peace with the reality that failure is part of every meaningful journey. Musashi would tell you to sit with your fear. Look directly at the worst-case scenario, accept it completely, and then watch as your paralysis transforms into power. The samurai who fears death hesitates, and hesitation in battle means death. The person who fears failure hesitates, and hesitation in life means mediocrity. There is a story about Musashi that reveals the depth of his mental conditioning. A young warrior once approached him and asked how he could develop the same fearlessness that Musashi possessed. Musashi told him to go to the edge of a cliff and stand with his toes hanging over the void. The young warrior did as instructed, and immediately his body began to shake. His heart pounded, and his mind screamed at him to step back to safety. Musashi then told him to stay there until the shaking stopped. Hours passed. The sun set and rose again. Eventually, the young warrior's body stopped trembling. He stood at the edge of death with complete calm. Musashi said to him, "Now you understand that fear is not in the cliff, it is in your mind, and what is in your mind can be mastered. This is the lesson most people never learn. They believe their fears are caused by external circumstances, when in reality, fear is always an internal creation that can be dismantled from within. The second principle of Musashi's mindset was total presence in the current moment. He called this the void, or the state of no mind. During a duel, there was no past and no future. There was only this breath, this heartbeat, this single instant where life and death hung in the balance. Musashi trained himself to silence the endless chatter of his thoughts and exist purely in the present moment. When your mind is cluttered with worries about what might happen or regrets about what already happened, you cannot see reality clearly. You are fighting ghosts instead of the actual opponent in front of you. But when your mind is empty and still you perceive everything with perfect clarity, you see the subtle shift in your enemy's weight before he attacks. You notice the flicker in his eyes that reveals his intention. You react without thinking because there is no separation between perception and action. Modern science has confirmed what Musashi discovered through decades of combat experience. When we are anxious, our prefrontal cortex becomes overloaded with activity and our performance suffers. But when elite performers enter a state of flow, their brain activity actually decreases. They stop overthinking and start operating on pure intuition. Athletes describe this as being in the zone. Musicians describe it as the music playing itself. Warriors like Musashi described it as becoming empty. Whatever you call it, the principle is the same. Your highest capabilities emerge not when you are trying harder, but when you are thinking less. The next time you face a high-pressure situation, remember that your anxiety is not helping you perform better. It is actively sabotaging your abilities. Your job is not to think your way to victory. Your job is to quiet your mind and let your training take over. The third principle that made Musashi legendary was his commitment to preparation so thorough that victory was decided before the battle even began. He arrived late to his duel with Sasaki Kichiro, not because he was disrespectful, but because he had calculated every psychological advantage. His opponent would grow angry and impatient. The sun would be at a different angle. His own mind would be calm, while his enemies would be agitated. Every detail was considered and exploited. Musashi once wrote that in strategy, it is important to see distant things as if they were close, and to take a distance view of close things. This means he was always thinking several moves ahead, while remaining fully aware of immediate reality. He studied his opponents for weeks before facing them. He learned their techniques, their weaknesses, their emotional triggers. By the time he stepped onto the battlefield, he had already fought the duel 1,000 times in his mind. You can apply this same obsessive preparation to any challenge you face. Before a difficult negotiation, know more about the other party than they know about themselves. Before launching a business, understand your market so deeply that you can predict customer behavior before they act. Before having a hard conversation, anticipate every possible response and prepare thoughtful replies. Most people fail not because they lack ability, but because they lack preparation. They walk into important moments having done the minimum required, and then wonder why things do not go their way. Musashi would have found this absurd. He prepared as if his life depended on it, because his life literally depended on it. You should prepare with the same intensity because in many ways your life depends on it too. The quality of your existence is directly tied to your ability to show up ready for the moments that matter. The fourth principle embedded in Musashi's philosophy was the rejection of comfort and the embrace of hardship. He spent decades wandering through Japan, living in the wilderness, sleeping on the ground, eating whatever he could find. He did not do this because he had no other choice. He did it because he understood that comfort is the enemy of growth. When you are too comfortable, you stop evolving, your skills atrophy, your mind grows dull. But when you deliberately seek difficulty, you force yourself to adapt and expand. Musashi wrote, "Do not seek pleasure for its own sake." He knew that the pursuit of easy living was a trap that captured most people and turned them into soft, predictable creatures incapable of extraordinary achievement. Look at your own life with honest eyes. How much of your daily routine is designed around avoiding discomfort? You stay in jobs you hate because searching for something better feels hard. You remain in relationships that drain you because leaving feels scary. You avoid pursuing your true goals because the path would require sacrifice and struggle. Musashi would challenge you to flip this equation entirely. Instead of asking, how can I be more comfortable? Ask, how can I become stronger? Seek out the cold shower instead of the warm bath. Choose the difficult conversation instead of the comfortable silence. Pick the challenging project instead of the easy one. Every time you voluntarily embrace hardship, you are training yourself to be the kind of person who can handle anything life throws at you. And that is exactly the kind of person who builds a legendary life. There was a period in Musashi's life when he stopped fighting humans altogether. He had become so skilled that no warrior would challenge him, and victory brought him no satisfaction. So he began fighting something far more dangerous than any samurai. He began fighting himself. He dedicated years to perfecting his calligraphy, his painting, his sculpture. He studied philosophy and poetry and strategy. He realized that the greatest enemy a person could ever face was not external. It was the weakness, laziness, and fear that lived within their own heart. Conquering others brought temporary glory. Conquering yourself brought permanent transformation. This is why Musashi's legend has survived for 4 centuries. He was not just a warrior. He was a complete human being who had mastered every dimension of his existence. This brings us to perhaps the most important lesson Musashi left behind. True fearlessness is not the absence of fear. It is the mastery of fear. Musashi felt fear like any other human being. His heart raced before duels. His hands probably trembled before his first kill as a 13-year-old boy. But he did not allow fear to control his actions. He acknowledged its presence, observed it without judgment, and then moved forward anyway. This is the critical distinction that separates legends from ordinary people. Ordinary people wait until they feel ready. They wait until the fear goes away. They wait for confidence to magically appear, but that day never comes. Legends understand that courage is not the absence of fear, but action in the presence of fear. They move forward while afraid, and in doing so, they discover that fear loses its power the moment you stop obeying it. Musashi's final masterpiece was written in a cave during the last weeks of his life. It was called the Dakodo, or the Path of Walking Alone. In it, he distilled everything he had learned over 60 years into 21 principles for living. Do not regret what you have done. Do not let yourself be guided by feelings of lust or love. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. Be detached from desire your whole life long. These were not rules for sword fighting. They were rules for existing as a free human being in a world that constantly tries to enslave you with fear, desire, and attachment. Musashi understood that the battles we fight externally are always reflections of battles happening internally. Master yourself and the external world becomes manageable. Remain a slave to your impulses, and even the smallest challenges will defeat you. As he lay dying, Musashi was asked if he had any regrets. He said that he had lived according to his principles, and that was enough. He had never retreated from a challenge. He had never betrayed his own code. He had pushed himself to the absolute limit of human capability and discovered what was possible when a person refuses to be limited by fear. He died not as a man who had avoided hardship, but as a man who had sought it, embraced it, and been transformed by it. His last breath was drawn not in fear, but in satisfaction, knowing that he had extracted every drop of potential from the brief time he was given. You have more comfort, more resources, and more opportunities than Musashi ever did. Yet most people accomplish a fraction of what he accomplished. The difference is not circumstance. The difference is mindset. You have been conditioned to avoid pain, to seek the easy path, to wait for perfect conditions that will never arrive. Musashi would look at your life and ask why you are wasting it, why you are letting fear make your decisions, why you are treating your potential like something that can be spent tomorrow when tomorrow is promised to no one. The fearless mindset that built his legend is available to you right now in this exact moment. It requires no special equipment, no expensive training, no particular talent. It requires only a decision. The decision to stop running from what scares you and start running toward it. The island where Musashi killed Sasaki Kajiro still exists today. Tourists visit it and stand on the same sand where one man's fearlessness changed history forever. But the real battlefield was never that island. The real battlefield was inside Musashi's mind. It is inside your mind too. Every morning you wake up and face the same duels he faced. The duel against laziness. The duel against self-doubt. The duel against the voice that tells you to play it safe and stay small. You can lose these duels every day for the rest of your life and no one will notice. Or you can win them and become something extraordinary. The choice is yours and is made not once, but every single moment of every single day. Musashi made his choice and became immortal. Now it is your turn to make yours.